The emergency alarms screamed through the corridors of Station Nexus, the largest diplomatic outpost in known space. Red warning lights flashed as security forces from dozens of species rushed through the metallic hallways, their weapons ready and their faces filled with fear. All units to Section 7. Commander Rylith's voice boomed over the communication system. His four muscular arms gestured wildly as he coordinated the search. The Vorth younglings have escaped containment. These are not ordinary children, they are born killers. The three juvenile Vorth had vanished from their secured quarters during the night. Each creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in dark scales that gleamed like armor. Their claws could slice through steel, and their crystalline fangs could inject venom that would paralyze most species within seconds. Even as younglings, barely past their first molting season, they were among the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Security teams spread throughout the station, scanning every room and corridor. The Zelani soldiers moved in tight formations, their energy shields crackling with defensive power. The insectoid cricks clicked their mandibles nervously as they checked ventilation shafts. Even the massive Gorlins, standing 12 feet tall themselves, seemed uneasy about facing the escaped predators. "They could be anywhere," whispered Lieutenant Vextar, a reptilian officer whose own species was known for their hunting abilities. Vorth younglings are smarter than most adult beings. They learn to stalk and kill before they learn to speak properly. The search continued for hours. Every shadow might hide death. Every sound could signal an attack. The diplomatic staff had been evacuated to secure areas, leaving only the security forces to hunt the missing creatures. Meanwhile, in the human quarters located in the station's quieter residential section, Ambassador Jinwoo Kim sat peacefully in his favorite reading chair. The Korean diplomat wore simple civilian clothes, a comfortable sweater and loose pants. His small apartment felt cozy compared to the grand chambers preferred by other species. Books lined the shelves, and several potted plants from Earth added touches of green to the metal walls. Jinwoo held a datapad in his hands, reading through trade agreements between Earth and the Centauri colonies. The emergency alarms had been blaring for hours, but he had learned to focus on his work despite the station's frequent drills and alerts. As a junior ambassador, he often worked late into the night, preparing for the next day's negotiations. A soft scratching sound came from his door. Jinwoo looked up from his reading, expecting to see a maintenance worker or perhaps another diplomat seeking a quiet place to work. Instead, 3 enormous shadows filled his doorway. The Vorth younglings stood there silently. Their dark scales caught the light from his reading lamp, creating an almost mesmerizing pattern. Their eyes, large, intelligent, and surprisingly gentle, looked directly at him. The largest one, clearly the leader, tilted its massive head as if studying the human. "Oh, hello there," Jinwoo said calmly, setting down his datapad. He had read about the Vorth species during his diplomatic training, but he had never seen one in person. "You must be the young visitors everyone has been talking about." The youngling stepped into his quarters without making a sound. Despite their massive size, they moved with incredible grace. The largest one approached Jinwoo's chair while the other 2 positioned themselves near the walls, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Jinwoo noticed something that the security reports had not mentioned: the creatures looked exhausted and stressed. Their scales had a dull color that suggested poor health, and their movements seemed slower than they should be for such young predators. "You look hungry," he observed, reaching into a small container beside his chair. He pulled out several nutrition bars, simple food designed for long space journeys. "These are not very exciting, but they should help." He offered 1 bar to the largest youngling, who sniffed it carefully before taking it with surprisingly gentle claws. The creature bit into the food and made a soft rumbling sound that seemed pleased. The other 2 younglings moved closer, and Jinwoo shared his remaining supplies with them. As they ate, Jinwoo noticed their scales beginning to brighten slightly. "Better?" he asked. The largest youngling looked at him and made another rumbling sound, this time softer and more musical. "I think I will call you Thrak," Jinwoo said to the largest one. He pointed to the others. "And you can be Vex, and you can be Nera." The names came from an ancient Earth story about brave young warriors. The younglings seemed to accept their new names, responding when he spoke to them. Suddenly, the door to his quarters exploded inward. Security forces poured into the room, led by Commander Rylith himself. The 4-armed alien raised multiple weapons, his face twisted with fear and anger. "Stay back!" Rylith shouted, his voice shaking. The predators could strike at any moment. The 3 Vorth younglings immediately rose to their full height, their scales shifting to a deeper, more threatening color. They positioned themselves around Jinwoo's chair, forming a protective circle. Low growling sounds came from their throats as they faced the armed security team. Jinwoo looked up from his datapad with genuine confusion on his face. Predators? He asked calmly. These are just children, Commander. He gestured toward Thrak with the same casual manner he might use to introduce human friends. This is Thrak, and his siblings Vex and Nera. They were hungry, so I shared my food rations. The security team stared in complete disbelief. Here was a human, one of the newest species to join the galactic community, sitting peacefully while three of the most feared creatures in known space stood guard over him like loyal pets. Commander Rylith's weapons trembled in his hands as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The Vorth younglings should have attacked by now. They should have torn the human apart and moved on to hunt other prey. Instead, they stood protectively around him, clearly bonded to this strange, fearless diplomat. Jinwoo calmly picked up his datapad again and returned to his reading, completely unbothered by the presence of armed soldiers or dangerous predators. In his mind, he was simply helping some lost children who had wandered into his home. The alarm systems throughout Station Nexus reached maximum volume as news of the situation spread like wildfire. Within minutes, armed forces from 12 different species converged on the human residential section. The corridors filled with the sound of heavy boots, clicking claws, and the hum of charging weapons. Commander Rylith coordinated the response from his mobile command center, a heavily armored vehicle that had been quickly deployed outside the human quarters. His four arms worked frantically across multiple control panels as he tried to understand what they were facing. I need containment units from species Alpha through Gamma, he barked into his communicator. And get me the heavy stun weapons. We cannot allow these predators to escape into the general population. The Zelani soldiers arrived first, their blue-scaled bodies protected by energy shields that crackled with defensive power. Behind them came the insectoid Krix, their compound eyes scanning every possible escape route. The massive Gorlins took positions at key intersections, their 12-foot frames blocking any path the Vorth might use to flee. Dr. Mion Park, the station's human xenobiologist, pushed through the crowd of security personnel. She had been studying in her laboratory when the emergency alert reached her. Unlike the armed soldiers around her, she carried only her scientific equipment and a deep curiosity about what was happening. Let me through, she said firmly to a Zelani officer who tried to stop her. I need to observe this behavior. She positioned herself behind the security barrier that had been hastily erected around Jinwoo's quarters. Through the transparent aluminum walls, she could see inside the room where the impossible scene continued to unfold. The three Vorth younglings had grown even larger since the security forces arrived. Their bodies expanded as their scales shifted from the dark, muted colors they had shown earlier to brilliant shades of deep crimson and gold. These were warning colors, the same patterns adult Vorth displayed before attacking their prey. Fascinating, Mion whispered to herself as she activated her recording equipment. They are not showing aggressive behavior patterns. This is protective posturing. The younglings had arranged themselves in a perfect defensive triangle around Jinwoo's reading chair. Thrak, the largest, faced the main entrance where most of the security forces had gathered. Vex positioned himself near the window, watching for threats from outside. Nera guarded the side door that led to the apartment's small kitchen area. Their crystalline fangs gleamed in the room's soft lighting as they bared them toward the surrounding forces. To most observers, this looked like preparation for attack. But Mion noticed something different. The fangs were not dripping with venom, and the youngling's body language suggested defense rather than offense. Thrak let out a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the station's metal walls. Several security officers stepped backward involuntarily, their hands tightening on their weapons. The sound was deep and powerful, carrying undertones that triggered fear responses in most species. That is not a hunting call, Mion said into her recorder. It sounds more like a warning. They are telling the security forces to stay away. Council leader Zephan's voice echoed through the communication system that had been hastily connected to Jinwoo's quarters. The elderly Altaran leader spoke from the safety of the command center, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. Ambassador Kim, Zephan called, his voice carefully controlled despite his obvious fear. Please listen carefully. You are in extreme danger. These creatures are apex predators. Please move away from them slowly. We have containment protocols ready to capture them safely. Inside the room, Jinwoo looked up from his datapad with the same puzzled expression he had worn earlier. He seemed genuinely confused by all the attention his new companions were receiving. Containment? He asked, his voice carrying clearly through the communication system. For what? They are just sitting here. To prove his point, Jinwoo reached into his small travel pack and pulled out another nutrition bar. The security forces watched in horror as he offered it to Vex, the youngling positioned near the window. Vex turned his massive head toward the human, his crimson and gold scales shifting to slightly softer tones. With claws that could slice through the reinforced hull plating of a starship, he delicately took the small food bar from Jinwoo's hand. The contrast was stunning, claws designed for killing handling the fragile offering with the gentleness of a butterfly landing on a flower. Impossible, breathed Commander Ryleth, watching through his monitors. Those claws should have torn his arm off. The standoff continued as more security personnel arrived. The aquatic Murdi brought their sonic weapons, designed to disorient predators with sound waves. The silicon-based Christoids contributed their hardest armor units, believing that only their diamond-like shells could protect against Vorth claws. Hours passed with neither side willing to back down. The younglings maintained their protective positions around Jinwoo's chair, their warning colors bright and clear. They did not move to attack, but they also did not allow anyone to approach their chosen human. Jinwoo continued his work as if nothing unusual was happening. He read through trade agreements, made notes on his datapad, and occasionally shared food or water with his unexpected companions. When Thrak seemed tired, Jinwoo offered him a cushion from his couch. When Nera appeared thirsty, he provided her with a cup of water. The security forces grew increasingly frustrated. Every protocol they knew said the Vorth should have attacked by now. Predator younglings were supposed to be driven by hunger and instinct, unable to form bonds with other species. Yet these three creatures seemed perfectly content to spend their time protecting a human diplomat who treated them like honored guests. Dr. Mion continued her observations, filling multiple data recorders with information about this unprecedented interaction. She watched as Jinwoo scratched behind Vex's jaw ridge, causing the massive predator to make sounds of contentment that resembled purring. "This changes everything we thought we knew about Vorth behavior," she murmured into her equipment. "They are not just mindless killing machines. They are capable of forming protective bonds with other species." As the hours stretched on, it became clear that this was not a typical hostage situation. The human was not a victim, he was a chosen companion. The younglings were not captors, they were guardians. And somewhere in this impossible scene lay the key to understanding something entirely new about the nature of interspecies relationships in the galaxy. The hours dragged on as the standoff continued, but help was coming from an unexpected source. Dr. Hiram Lee had been working frantically in her laboratory, surrounded by audio equipment and translation devices. As the station's leading xenosociologist, she specialized in understanding how different alien species communicated with each other. When the emergency first began, Hiram had immediately started recording every sound the Vorth younglings made. Her sensitive equipment picked up not just their loud rumbling calls, but also the quieter sounds they made when they thought no one was listening. She had spent hours analyzing these recordings, running them through every translation program the Council possessed. "Something is wrong with the standard interpretation," she muttered to herself as she worked. Her dark eyes were tired from staring at sound wave patterns on her screens, but she could not stop. These are not hunting calls or threat displays. Hiram had studied Vorth communication for years, though she had never worked with live specimens before. The adult Vorth rarely interacted with other species, preferring to keep their distance from the galactic community. Most of what scientists knew about their language came from long-distance observations and intercepted communications. As she fine-tuned her translation equipment, patterns began to emerge from the recordings. The younglings were not making random sounds, they were trying to communicate something specific. Their vocalizations had structure and meaning, like words in a language that no one had bothered to learn properly. Council leader Zephan, Hiram called through the communication system, her voice tight with excitement and concern. "I need to speak with you immediately." Within minutes, she was connected to the command center where Zephan and his advisors were coordinating the response to the crisis. The elderly Altaran leader's tentacles curled with anxiety as he waited for her report. "What have you discovered, Dr. Lee?" Zephan asked. Hiram took a deep breath before delivering news that would change everything they thought they knew about the situation. "Council leader, the younglings are not being aggressive. They are distressed. They keep repeating the same phrases over and over again." She activated her translation equipment, and the command center filled with the sounds the Vorth younglings had been making. Through her advanced programs, the rumbling calls became recognizable words. "Guardian parents sick," the translation system announced in a mechanical voice. "Guardian parents not respond. Seeking help aid. Seeking safety protection." The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. These were not escaped predators hunting for prey. These were frightened children looking for help. They have been asking for assistance this entire time, Hiram continued, her voice filled with amazement. Every sound they made was a distress call. They have been trying to tell us that their adult guardians are ill. Through her careful translation work, the truth finally surfaced like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. The adult Vorth who had accompanied the diplomatic mission were not sleeping in their quarters as everyone had assumed. They had fallen ill with a rare pathogen during their long journey to the station. The younglings had been left alone and frightened in an alien environment, surrounded by strange smells and unfamiliar sounds. Without their adult guardians to protect them, they had wandered the station seeking someone who would help them. Most species either ran away in terror or tried to capture them with force, Hiram explained to the command center. But the human ambassador did something different. He approached them with kindness. Back in his quarters, Jinwoo had been listening to the communication through his room's speakers. When council leader Zephan asked him to explain his actions, the Korean diplomat responded with characteristic simplicity. "I just saw scared kids," Jinwoo said, gently stroking Thrak's massive head as the youngling rested beside his chair. "They were making distress calls, anyone could hear it if they listened carefully. When I offered them food and spoke gently to them, they calmed down." His explanation was so simple that it made the complex military response seem foolish. While dozens of security officers had prepared for battle, one human had simply offered friendship to creatures in need. Dr. Mion, who had been monitoring the situation from behind the security barrier, immediately requested permission to examine the adult Vorth in their quarters. With Hiram's translation help, she was able to communicate with the younglings and learn the location where their guardians were resting. What she found confirmed everyone's worst fears and best hopes. The 3 adult Vorth were unconscious in their diplomatic quarters, their massive bodies burning with fever. They had been sick for days, unable to care for their young ones or communicate their condition to the station's medical staff. "It is a bacterial infection," Mion announced after running medical scans on the adults. "It is serious, but completely treatable with standard antibiotics. These adults have been unconscious for days." The revelation changed everything about how the council viewed the situation. The younglings had not escaped, they had been forced to leave their unconscious guardians to seek help. Their protective behavior around Jinwoo was not aggression, it was gratitude toward the only being who had shown them kindness in their time of need. They bonded with him because he was the first person to treat them as individuals rather than monsters, Hiram explained to the amazed command staff. In Vorth culture, younglings imprint on protective figures during times of stress. Ambassador Kim became their chosen guardian. As medical teams rushed to treat the adult Vorth with the antibiotics they needed, the security forces slowly began to lower their weapons. The crisis was over, but its implications would reshape how the galaxy thought about interspecies relationships. In his quiet quarters, Jinwoo continued reading his trade agreements while 3 of the most feared predators in known space rested peacefully around his chair. To him, nothing had changed. He had simply helped some children who needed assistance. But to the watching galaxy, everything had changed forever. The emergency assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species gathered to understand what had happened on Station Nexus. The massive chamber, designed to hold the galaxy's most important diplomatic meetings, had never seen such urgent activity. Scientists, diplomats, and military leaders filled every seat, their faces showing confusion and wonder. Dr. Jae-hyun Cho stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by holographic displays showing complex brain scans and evolutionary data. The Korean scientist had worked without sleep for 3 days, analyzing every aspect of the unprecedented bonding between the human ambassador and the Vorth younglings. Distinguished members of the council, Jae-hyun began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced sound system. What we witnessed on this station was not an accident. It was the result of something extraordinary in human evolution. The holographic displays showed detailed images of human brain structure compared to other species in the galaxy. Areas of the brain lit up in different colors, showing how neural pathways connected and functioned. For years, we believed humans evolved primarily as persistence hunters, Jae-hyun continued. We thought their main advantage was the ability to chase prey over long distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. But we were wrong. That was only part of the story. He gestured to the brain scans, highlighting specific regions that glowed brighter in human specimens than in any other known species. Humans also developed extraordinary abilities in areas we never fully understood before. Their brain structure shows massive development in regions associated with cross-species empathy and pack-bonding behaviors. A murmur of amazement rippled through the assembly. Many species had evolved complex social structures within their own kind, but cross-species bonding was extremely rare in the galaxy. Most creatures could barely tolerate other species, let alone form emotional connections with them. Humans possess an almost unique ability to read distress signals across species barriers, Jae-hyun explained. While other species hear only noise or threats, humans can recognize calls for help from creatures completely unlike themselves. The scientist activated another holographic display showing communication patterns. When the Vorth younglings were making their distress calls, every other species on the station interpreted those sounds as hunting cries or territorial warnings. Only the human ambassador recognized them as requests for help. In the audience, Ambassador Soyeon Lim sat with the rest of the human delegation, watching the presentation with growing understanding. The elegant diplomat had served Earth's interests in the galaxy for over a decade, but she had never realized that her species possessed such unique abilities. When Jae-hyun invited questions from the assembly, Soyeon stood and was recognized to speak. "If I may add some historical context," she said, her voice calm and measured. "On Earth, humans successfully domesticated dozens of species that other animals could not even approach." She walked to the center of the hall, her presence commanding attention from every representative present. Wolves were fierce predators that attacked most creatures on sight, but humans turned them into loyal companions we call dogs. Wild horses would flee from or fight other animals, but humans learned to ride them and work alongside them. The assembly listened with fascination as Soyeon continued. "Humans have always been what you might call bridge builders. We have this strange ability to see past the surface fear and connect with other living beings." Dr. Jae-hyun nodded in agreement. "The historical evidence supports this completely. Humans are the only species we know of that actively seeks to understand and bond with creatures unlike themselves." Meanwhile, back on Station Nexus, the adult Vorth had begun to recover under Dr. Mion's careful treatment. The bacterial infection that had nearly killed them was responding well to the antibiotics, and they were finally conscious and able to communicate. The largest adult, a massive creature named Vorthak, had insisted on speaking directly with the council about what had happened to his younglings. His voice rumbled through the translation equipment as he addressed the emergency assembly via communication link. "The small human Jinwoo saved more than our offspring," Vorthak's translated words echoed through the chamber. "He saved our species' faith in the galactic community." The adult Vorth explained that his people had been reluctant members of the Galactic Council, joining only because they needed access to certain trade routes. Most species feared them too much to attempt real communication or cooperation. "When our younglings were frightened and alone, every other species either ran away or tried to capture them like dangerous animals," Vorthak continued. "But the humans saw them as children who needed help. This has never happened before in our recorded history." Dr. Jae-hyun's research had revealed that the Vorth younglings had formed what their species called a guardian bond with Jinwoo. This was an extremely rare evolutionary response that occurred only when young Vorth encountered a being who showed them genuine care and protection during a crisis. "In our entire galactic history, no non-Vorth species has ever triggered this bonding response," Vorthak explained. "It requires not just kindness, but an intuitive understanding of our needs that we believed was impossible for other beings to possess." The implications were staggering. The human's fearless compassion and natural ability to read the younglings' distress had triggered an evolutionary response that bridged two completely different species in a way that had never occurred before. "Ambassador Kim did not just prevent our younglings from starving," Vorthak's voice grew deeper with emotion. "He prevented a diplomatic catastrophe that could have led to war between our species and the Council." The assembly fell silent as they realized how close they had come to disaster. If the security forces had killed the younglings, or if the adults had died from their illness, the Vorth Collective might have declared war on the entire galactic community. "One human's simple act of kindness may have saved countless lives," Jae-hyun concluded. "And it has revealed something remarkable about humanity's role in our galaxy." The news of what happened on Station Nexus spread across the galaxy like ripples on a pond. Within days, every major news network was broadcasting the incredible story of the human ambassador who had befriended 3 deadly predator younglings with nothing more than kindness and food bars. The Vorth Collective, a powerful military alliance that had remained mostly isolated from galactic politics, sent their highest-ranking diplomats to meet with Earth's representatives. For the first time in centuries, the feared warrior species was offering friendship instead of simply demanding respect through strength. "Your species has shown us something we thought was impossible," declared war leader Vorthak during the formal ceremony. His massive form towered over the human delegation, but his voice carried warmth instead of threat. "We offer humanity full military protection and exclusive trading rights with our territories." The alliance was unprecedented. The Vorth possessed some of the most advanced weapons technology in the galaxy, and their protection meant that no aggressive species would dare attack Earth or its colonies. But even more valuable than military might was what came next. Within weeks of the incident, requests began pouring into Earth's diplomatic offices from across the galaxy. Species that had been locked in conflicts for generations wanted human mediators to help them find peace. Creatures that had never trusted outsiders were specifically asking for human ambassadors to facilitate their first contact with the galactic community. The Skarnathi, a race of armored insectoids who had been at war with their neighbors for 300 years, sent a formal request through the council. "We have heard that humans can see beyond the surface to understand true intentions," their message read. "We wish to learn if peace is possible." Ambassador Jinwoo found his quiet life completely transformed almost overnight. Council leader Zephyr personally visited Earth to offer him a position that had never existed before, Director of Interspecies Mediation. "We are creating this role specifically for you," Zephyr explained during their meeting in Earth's capital. "Your species has shown abilities that we desperately need in our galaxy." Jinwoo accepted the position, though he insisted on choosing his own team. Dr. Mion joined as the chief medical officer, bringing her expertise in treating different alien biologies. Dr. Hiram became the communication specialist, using her translation skills to help species understand each other for the first time. But perhaps the most surprising additions to the team were Thrak, Vex, and Nera themselves. The three Vorth younglings had grown rapidly during their recovery, reaching nearly adult size within months. Yet they refused to return to their homeworld, choosing instead to stay with the human who had saved them. "They have bonded with you permanently," Vorthak explained to Jinwoo during one of their meetings. "In our culture, this means they are now part of your family. They will protect you and serve alongside you for the rest of their lives." The three Vorth became the first non-human members of the Human Diplomatic Corps. Their presence at negotiations often shocked other species, but it also proved beyond doubt that impossible bonds could be forged between completely different beings. The Galactic Council quickly established new protocols based on what they called the human model. Instead of approaching unknown species with weapons ready and shields raised, the new guidelines emphasized curiosity and compassion as the first tools of diplomacy. "We must ask ourselves what these beings need, not what they might do to us," became the motto of the new approach. Training programs were developed to teach other species how to recognize distress calls and offers of friendship from unfamiliar creatures. The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, the crystalline hive minds of the Outer Rim, who had never communicated with biological life forms, requested human contact. The Void Swimmers, mysterious beings who lived in the empty space between stars, sent their first diplomatic message in over 1,000 years. By the end of the first year, 17 previously hostile or isolated species had joined the galactic community through human-mediated contact. Wars that had raged for centuries ended with peace treaties negotiated in quiet rooms where humans helped ancient enemies finally understand each other. Jinwoo often found himself amazed by how much his life had changed. His office on the new diplomatic station was filled with gifts from grateful species, crystal sculptures from the Silicon Collective, living flowers from the Plant Consortium, and even a small star captured in a containment field from the energy beings of Sector 7. But his favorite moments were still the quiet ones, like watching Thrak teach defensive techniques to human security personnel. The massive Vorth had grown to his full adult size, standing nearly 12 feet tall and weighing several tons. Yet he moved with incredible gentleness when working with the much smaller humans. "Remember, strength is not about causing harm," Thrak would tell the trainees in his deep, rumbling voice. "True strength protects those who cannot protect themselves." As Jinwoo observed these training sessions, he often reflected on how a simple act of sharing food had changed everything. He had not set out to revolutionize galactic diplomacy. He had simply seen some frightened children who needed help and had done what felt natural. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not as conquerors who took what they wanted through force, or as scholars who impressed others with their knowledge. Instead, they had become the species that could make family out of anyone, even predators that others feared to approach. The universe, it turned out, had been filled with lonely beings who were simply waiting for someone to care enough to reach out with an open hand instead of a closed fist. And in the end, that simple difference had changed everything.